The 12 best war movies of the 1980s, ranked, after a period of interesting depictions of war in the form of 60s adventure and gritty 70s filmmaking, the 80s saw a blending of the two styles to form some of the most seminal classics of the genre. The films of this era are characterized by their philosophical explorations of the meaning of war and its consequences in the grand spectrum of the human condition. These films would go on to pave the way for 90s war films like Saving Private Ryan and The Thin Red Line. Here is a list of the very best. 12. Born on the 4th of July, 1989. Oliver Stone ended the 80s with another Vietnam War movie starring Tom Cruise, in what many considered to be his very best film role. Stone's focus in Born on the 4th of July was more on the aftermath of the war on the individuals who participated in it, using the story of Ron Kovic as the canvas. After being left a paraplegic due to a war injury, Kovic returns to a world full of anger and animosity. His troublesome experiences left him on the brink of despair, turning to booze and drugs as a coping mechanism. It is through the course of these moments that he finds a calling in his life through the anti-war effort. Cruise gives a gripping portrait of the torn-down Kovic, channeling his humanity and displaying a strong collection of emotions. 11. Hamburger Hill, 1987. The film follows the story of various military divisions as they fight the Battle of Hamburger Hill, one of the most famous and brutal battles of the Vietnam War. The film is an ensemble piece depicting the acts and concerns of the many members that participated in this attack. It does a wonderful job of introducing us to our characters and setting the piece in motion. Once it reaches the titular attack, it becomes a meditative experience of the chaos of war and the people who suffer from it. It is a relentless tour de force, never letting the viewer relax and always on the brink of total collapse. The film finds its meaning through its depiction of tenacity. 10. Glory, 1989. This Civil War-era epic continues to grow in reputation with every passing year. Starring a stellar cast of A-list actors at either the height, Matthew Broderick, or rise, Denzel Washington, Morgan Freeman, of their careers, it presents a gripping depiction of the struggle for freedom in the face of insurmountable odds. Glory is a poignant commentary on the fight for liberty, following the lives of recently freed slaves as they battle for the Union Army in the hopes of cementing their newfound freedom through victory in the conflict. It demonstrates the many complicated aspects that go about producing such a result, and the bonds the characters form along the way. Unlike previous war films depicting the era, there is a central message on how the war was necessary, albeit as the consequence of great loss. 9. Platoon, 1986. Basing the story on his own experiences in Vietnam, Oliver Stone crafted a fascinating story of good versus evil, all seen through the prism of war. Following a star-studded ensemble including Charlie Sheen, Willem Dafoe, Tom Berenger, and Johnny Depp, it presents a Dionysian and Apollonian view of war, using the 25th Infantry Division as a backdrop. The division is divided between Sergeant Barnes, Berenger, and Sergeant Elias, Dafoe. Barnes's group is savage and sadistic, while Elias is more outgoing and passive, seeing the war more through the lenses of a waste of time. As both groups face the perils and hardships the war bestows upon them, the animosity grows to a breaking point. Platoon is unique in the way it presents the war as a fractured endeavor with no redeeming qualities. It is there to disrupt and destroy, building nothing but pain and resentment. Director Oliver Stone captures the idea through this story of men who were thrown into the jungle with no true vision of what they were actually fighting for. 8. Full Metal Jacket, 1987. Legendary filmmaker Stanley Kubrick's second-to-last film was a visceral and gut-wrenching experience into the essence of control and evil through the eyes of the Vietnam War. While carrying similar themes as Platoon, Kubrick's style, methodical direction, and differing conclusions make it a more chimerical project. Full Metal Jacket is divided between one half in boot camp and another at the war itself. We follow the character of Joker and his journey across both halves, seeing how his traumatic experience during training, where he saw his closest friend go crazy. Kubrick crafted an impeccable and methodical picture, showing us the gritty side of war through more distant lenses, as he did for most of his filmography. The result is a polished presentation in both scope and technique, presenting us with a philosophical argument about how the hardships of war are what force us to become evil, and it is an ever-present side effect permeating the rest of society. 7. Das Boot, 1981. The film that launched director Wolfgang Petersen's career into the stratosphere happens to be one of the most impeccable war films ever made. Claustrophobic, poignant, and slow-burning, Das Boot follows the journey of a German submarine U-96 during the middle of World War II. The story is told through the perspective of war correspondent Lieutenant Werner, who catalogues most of the journey. Over the course, the crew meets a series of gut-wrenching obstacles and attacks, turning the once bright and impressionable men into rugged men of war. It makes a poignant observation on perseverance and strength of will, never glorifying or condemning the war, but demonstrating how those who experienced it found the way to survive. No discussion of the film can be completed without mentioning its ending, which can be described as nothing more than a very tough pill to swallow, as the men, even in the conquering of their obstacles, still find a way to lose a big part of themselves. 6. Come and See, 1985. A modest hit when originally released in 1985, Come and See has gathered a massive reputation in the 21st century. Directed by Aline Klimov, it centers its story on the journey of Flyora, a young Russian living in a village in Belarusia right in the midst of the Nazi Germany invasion. Upon joining a band of resistance fighters, Flyora goes on a journey that is best described as a counterpart to hell, where he sees the very worst that humanity has to offer. The film is now considered by many to be the best war film ever made, vividly showing its horrors to a degree never seen. It's a powerful picture that stays with its viewers long after the credits roll, made even more impactful by the way it uses the camera and relates the events in dark and moody tones. The essence of the film lies in its total rejection of war as nothing more than a huge stench for mankind, bringing a level of suffering insurmountable in its destructive powers. 5. Hope and Glory, 1987. Hope and Glory is a transparent recreation of life during World War II in London's suburbs. The story follows a little boy whose father joins the troops, leaving him, his mother, and his sister to experience the domestic side of war on their own. The little boy's, Sebastian Rice-Edwards, bitterness over being separated from his father is quickly appeased by little victories that quench the boy's curiosity about life, war, sexuality, and survival. War is already a painfully fascinating experience, but what the movie adds to that is the childhood perspective of it that makes war somehow feel less serious and intense. Even though the raids are the same, a child experiences them in a less bitter way than would an adult. It could be boyish insouciance, or the general hopefulness that children are born with that makes their experience of war less fatal and gruesome despite the fear and the looming death. If that is Borman's intention behind making the movie, then it's definitely a success. 4. Purple Hearts, 1984. Something about falling in love during the war will never grow out of fashion. The idea is as old as Purple Hearts, Farewell to Arms, and Pearl Harbor. It's always going to be there. This movie tells the story of dedicated Navy surgeon Dr. Don Jardian, who falls in love with a nurse named Deborah Solomon. In a climate of war, fear, and death during the Vietnam War, the two characters succumb to the insistent pull of attraction. Although Deborah is careful not to have her heart broken again, following the death of her beloved husband during his military duties, she spends a night with the surgeon and allows, although reluctantly, for the flower of love and whatever consolation and escape it offers, to blossom among bombs and blood. A movie of the same name and a similar story is made in 2022 by Elizabeth Allen Rosenbaum, indicating the agelessness of the theme of love and war and the influence of the 1984 Purple Hearts. 3. Gallipoli, 1981. Compared in many ways to All Quiet on the Western Front, Gallipoli is a special tribute to the Australian soldiers who sacrificed their lives in the Battle of Gallipoli, in which the Entente powers sought to weaken the Ottoman Empire. The story is told from the perspective of two Australian sprinters, Archie, Mark Lee, and Frank, Mel Gibson, who want to join the army seeking whatever glory, honor, and tribute war promises to offer for young men without a purpose. The two friends are initially rejected because of their young age, but after training, their wish to join the front line is fulfilled. After facing the horrors of it all, they are left with a changed perspective and a more mature story to tell. This movie is one of the most highly influential war movies ever made. 2. Uncommon Valor, 1983. The thing about war is that it doesn't always give you bad news of people dying. Some corpses remain anonymous and some are even lost. Uncommon Valor is about a colonel who has not heard from his son in years but still believes that he is being held as a prisoner of war in Laos. He organizes a team of the best soldiers, mostly his son's friends, to go on a mission to save his missing son despite the government's refusal to help him. The film might not all be fiction, as it has a tangible resemblance to the real-life adventures of Colonel Beau Gritz. In fact, this particular movie doesn't tell a story about war itself. It passes the message of the importance of considering soldiers for the human beings that they are and looking at them individually and not as collateral damage that doesn't warrant losing any resources over saving. This premise reveals the dehumanizing aspect of organized war and how the sacrifices asked of soldiers are not met with the appropriate appreciation. 1. Empire of the Sun, 1987. Based on the autobiographical novel by J.G. Ballard, Steven Spielberg's Empire of the Sun tells the moving story of a British boy named Jim from a rich family living in Shanghai during the outbreak of World War II. When the Japanese forces decided to capture all foreigners in prison camps, the boy was abruptly separated from his parents in a heart-wrenching scene. Luckily, he found a protector in Basie, an American hustler born to survive. The boy's fascination with airplanes keeps his spirits unbroken and his hope in tomorrow ignited. Jim runs around the camp, knows all the secret places and tricks to make his camp experience less dreary. Similar to Hope and Glory, Empire of the Sun portrays a war less depressing and fatal from the ever-renewed, unbreakable spirit of childhood that brings hope and teaches resilience.